having that skill or having those skills that allow you to be able to tell the story in your own way not only brings you confidence, but also brings confidence to others around you who are either trusting you with the message that you are giving or just trusting you with your leadership and your vision as to where you're going to take them. So for me, I think it's a fundamental tool that should be taught. And one other thing I should say just before I finish is that the conversations I had with Richard Branson was around his dyslexia. And I know it was something that kind of like hampered his public speaking for a while, because he would do some stuff, but it was a lot of showmanship, right? It was that, yeah, I'm going to lift this person up, I'm going to do the balloon, all the rest of it. He didn't have to speak, he could do the creative side of it, but having to sit down and get answered questions. And I remember when we had our first interview, actually, we went to his house just before we did Pitch to Rich. Went to his house and I was...
So back in 2015, I was working at Prezi and I ended up at Richard Branson's Pitch to Rich event in London. And when I walked in, my guest today, David McQueen, was up on the stage emceeing the event. He was spellbinding. He had the room glued to his talk. I instantly thought, I've got to talk to this guy. So we ended up working together a lot at my time at Prezi, including webinars, and he came and spoke at the Present conference in London that we used to do. And we even shared a stage together at a sales conference once where we were both speakers. David McQueen has had a varied, twisting, winding career path that has taken him from accounting to the IT tech world, to writing a book called The Brave Leader, to various TED stages around the world, to establishing an executive leadership coaching business. And trust me, that's barely scratching the surface. Based in the UK with over 3 decades of experience, he has made significant contributions to leadership development, focusing on inclusive leadership culture and business growth. He provides executive coaching, board facilitation, and keynote speaking services. His coaching sessions are known for their challenging and reflective nature, helping senior leaders enhance their decision-making and communication skills. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and get ready for some knowledge bombs. Let's go. David, welcome. It's so lovely to have you here.
Pleasure. Pleasure is all mine. Pleasure is all mine.
So I thought I would start by taking you back into your past, because I understand that you started your speaking career early in the church, of all places. So I thought maybe that's a good place to start, because it's that early experience I think is important.
No, 100%. So when I was younger, my parents were from the Caribbean. They came here in their 20s, and I grew up in a church that was very, very encouraged you a lot to sing, to play music, to speak. And so I was doing poetry, speaking about religious matters, talking to young people from quite a young age. I think I was about 5 or 6 when I probably started kind of like getting into my rhythm. And it was encouraged. People liked what I said. They loved the way that I engaged them, and they just encouraged me. And so it's been an upward journey ever since, basically, an upward journey since then.
And can you remember back then, like, was that in the beginning it was utterly terrifying and then you just got used to it, or you just felt it was a safe space? What can you remember back then? I appreciate it's a long time.
No, I always felt it was safe. And there were moments where, like, I remember when I had to do a poem one time, and I froze because I forgot the lines and just burst into tears, and somebody just came and stood beside me and said, "No, just keep going, just keep going."
Yeah.
Doing little sniffles, but just kept going with it. And I think I've always admired and seen other people who were orators and speakers, and I always loved the way that they were able to get people to listen to what they said, tell really good stories, have really good pause and intonation and projection. And I loved all that stuff. And so I modeled individuals in my church, and obviously had some really good school teachers who, not just the shouty ones, but ones who could obviously capture people's attention. And that always inspired me. And so, there were moments where I had wobbles, but I always felt it was in a space where people would support me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think, as beyond school, when you got into college, you were even starting to help other people with interviews and things, correct?
Yeah, 100%. So people would say to me, like, I would do school assemblies and I would do presentations in college, and people go, I just don't understand how you're so confident. I'm like, I've done it for years, and I've kind of like learned some of the craft. I was a bit of a geek then. I would go off and read about, oration, and I was part of a debate society as well in school. And that really kind of like gave me the confidence to just see things slightly differently. And so sometimes when people were really terrified, I would sit down and I go, okay, here's some things. Here's how you can plan it out. And, and if effectively, what's the worst that can kind of like happen? Um, Knowing that a lot of worse things could happen when you're 17 or 18. The world seems a very daunting place. But just went through and supported. And yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed doing that. And yeah, some people were quite happy as a result of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then where did you go from there? Where was how did your speaking thing continue from there?
Yeah.
Obviously, we can talk a bit about how we met, but
Yeah.
what about the gap between that?
In between that. So essentially when I was in school and college, I was a youth worker as well. I effectively started when I was about 17, 18 properly. And what that meant is that I had to do a lot of traveling around not only London, but around the country. I remember when there was one point where I was taken to some of the more challenging estates around the UK. So I went to St Paul's in Bristol. I went to Moss Side in Manchester. I went to Toxteth in Liverpool. I went to, I think it's called St Mary's in Nottingham, and then in and around a couple of estates in London. And a lot of it was just they found, because I had a sense of humor, I was able to tell stories and engage people in a way that a lot of other people really didn't. So I found it from quite young, which is the other bit I should have mentioned, is that a little cheeky bit of humor could actually capture people's attention. I could go right up to that line and then pull it right all the way back in again. And so I did a lot of work around youth work. And one of the things that really inspired me when I was doing that is I liked a lot of the comedians who were, good comedians of the day. And I used to listen to the tapes. So I used to listen to, like, one of my favorite ones from back in the day was a comedian called George Carlin, who was a very politically minded one, but very good storyteller. And then I listened to others like Red Fox and Eddie Murphy. Billy Connolly I was a massive fan of Billy Connolly and his storytelling, Eddie Izzard, and some of the others who were based in the UK as well. And I really loved, I'm trying to remember them. I can't remember what they were called as a collective, but I remember Lenny Henry, Dawn French, Jennifer Saunders, Hugh Laurie, and
Yeah.
Fry. They were all
Yeah.
part of a collective, and it was that. What I loved about it was that dry British humor. And so I would use that wherever I traveled as well, as part of my kind of repertoire to kind of like use a little bit of sarcasm, do that kind of storytelling, take people on that whole loop, but use it as a vehicle to try and get across the aspiration that I wanted as a youth leader. Then from there, I got into work. As I said, my parents were from the Caribbean, so you had a choice of four vocations. We call them the migrant four, right? So you had to do law, finance, something to do with medicine and healthcare, or engineering. Those were the four. I wanted to be an artist. My parents looked at me like, "We're happy for you. Go and get a piece of pen and paper, and you can art all you want on the weekend, but you're not doing that for a living." And so I ended up in finance because I loved money and I loved entrepreneurialism. And I found myself in my workplace doing a lot of presentations for people who just didn't understand finance, who didn't understand accounts, or even people in my department who were terrified of giving a monthly report. I'm like, it's just numbers. Just say how much we got in, how much we spent, and there's a balance at the bottom, and there's a variance. But just coaching people along with that as well. And then my third career, before I kind of jumped into doing my own business, which obviously is where we met, is I was in IT and I was doing a lot of project management. And again, a lot of the people who I worked with were very introverted. So individuals would do these amazing projects, but they just didn't want to speak. And so again, I would both do the presentations, but coach people on how to do that as well. And so I realized, again, both of those careers, that I was doing a lot of stuff around personal development and presentation and communication skills. And I thought, right, I want to also develop on my craft. And so I learned a little bit of stand-up comedy. I did some amateur dramatics. I went to improv classes. I did, what's it called? Pechakucha, where you've got to do those
Yes.
really quick, right? You got to do those really quick presentations.
Yeah. I've done one of those.
Oh,
It's wow. It's quite an experience.
having to condense what? Having to condense that stuff. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Um,
Woo. So One second, whilst I've got you, this is a brand new YouTube channel. It would help me so much if you could subscribe and help me spread the word. You're amazing. Thank you. Bye.
And then there were these really good platforms like The Moth and other kind of storytelling nights that were based around the UK, which I went to and learnt different kind of storytelling techniques, primarily from a Western lens, but I also learned storytelling through South Asian traditions such as Urdu poetry, um, through through there's this thing in Tibet, can't remember what it's called, but it's a bit of a chant. But again, it was about the storytelling, learn about a Native American storytelling. So all these disciplines around the world, you realize there were lots of similarities, but there were different flavors as to how they delivered it. And I still do this. I still learn. I still go on these little courses, little spaces, just to learn what does communication look like in all these different parts of the world, whether I'm speaking there or whether when I'm dealing with executives of my work, I have to then coach them as to how to navigate and communicate in those spaces.
Yeah, and I
And then,
think
yeah, go ahead.
no, and I think it also each one gives you another element of the skill, because I know for myself, I've done the last few years, I've been doing a lot of improv, and definitely it's suddenly you see that, okay, that's more about how can I have confidence on a stage when I do zero preparation, and it's all about how do I make my scene partner look good. So I think like I love the breadth of all the things that you've done, because I think each thing is like another piece of the jigsaw that has
Yeah,
built that skill for you.
no, 100%. And I often share this because people will look and they'll go, "Oh, you're really confident on stage and you do that stuff." And I'm like, I'm an eternal, but I'm a lifelong student of presentation skills. I will always be learning. And you know, again, as I said, when we met, I was hosting, and it was one
Yes.
of those things that I did. You know, I could moderate a panel, I could host a conference, I could deliver a keynote, I can do a seminar, do a workshop, and all those different techniques for me, they tap into a different side of your speaking. They tap into a different side of your energy as to how you think on your feet and how you plan stuff. And so, yeah, always, you know, always learning how best to use that voice, how best to use your tone, and how to get your messaging across, regardless of the kind of platform that you're on, but always learning how you're going to deliver them.
Yeah. And was there a specific moment, or maybe it was like a number of moments, where you suddenly realized this public speaking skill is important, or you suddenly it changed in your head how
Yeah,
important it was?
I think there were a couple of moments, to be honest. I think one of my first moments was being able to make people laugh in school,
Yeah.
knowing that I could be in the back of the classroom or what have you, and being able to crack a little joke or say something and have my colleagues like in fits of laughter, and the teacher not knowing what actually happened because my head's down and I'm doing work, throwing my voice and and all that kind of stuff. I was like, okay, this is a bit. To be fair, there were a couple of times the smarter teachers knew it was me and I was in detention. I like my favorite teacher, actually, I met up with him a number of years back. He just said, you know what, the amount of times I remember that you would get in trouble being your head of year because you were talking in class. He said, can you remember what I said to you? And I said, honestly, it's stuck with me all my life. You said, look, if you're going to be able to say something and if you're going to get in trouble for a good reason. And so I've loved that ever since. I've been going out there causing good trouble, right? Because I want to get in trouble for a good reason. But that really stuck with me. And another one that really hit me was I spoke in Atlanta, in America in the oh god, it was in the 90s now. And I went and I spoke at a youth conference, and I think it was about 2,500 people there, and that was the first largest crowd I've ever done. And so there was the cultural divide of not only speaking in America, but speaking to a multicultural audience in America, and making sure I had the jokes and the nuance and the timing and all the rest of it. And I was like, I actually really like this. I could do this. And I've kind of like built a really big youth working kind of organization and capacity out of that. And then the third one for me was um, I was just invited to my first corporate event. And I'd been hosting awards and doing these little things. So I was just like, okay, this is somebody's going to pay me to come up there and crack jokes at their expense without obviously reducing them to tears and all the rest of it. I can do this. And someone said, you know what, it'd be really good for you to talk about some of the work you do, but in a more structured way rather than just being the comedian at the front. And at first, I thought it was a bit of an insult. I was like, okay, like, really, you don't like the comedian at the front? But then it really helped me to start really crafting keynotes for organizations. And that's where my professional speaking journey started, where I knew that I could go into these organizations and they were originally it was just doing keynotes, but then it could expand even further. But it was about being in that space and going, right, I don't know everything, but the limited amount of knowledge that I do have on this specific area of expertise, I can go in and I can really get people to think about behavior change. I can get them to think about empowering themselves or giving agency to others. And that's where those three pivotal moments, that one in school where I realized I could kind of like get away with murdering, but my teacher told me to go and cause good trouble. The second one, speaking on that stage to youth audiences, and then since then being able to go on and speak to over 2 million young people around the world as a result of that, both on TV and in person. And then lastly, doing my first corporate gigs, which just allowed me to kind of go into those spaces, and not only corporate, because I've also done government and I've done third sector as well. But those three would be the pivotal moments for me.
Yeah. And I can imagine someone listening to our conversation who will hear you talk about, I went over to America, spoke to 2,500 people, and they'll be thinking, I'm utterly terrified by the thought of that. So what is it, do you think, that made you ready for something like that?
I think with all the disciplines, one of the most important things I learned is that as a speaker, I'm just a character in someone else's narrative. Even when I'm on the stage, I'm just a character there. So I've been given that position and that opportunity to go and speak there. And it's not about me. It never is about me. I'm a character in somebody else's story. And so I have to play that part. It doesn't mean that I lose a sense of who I am, but it just means that I'm not putting myself under pressure to think that I've got to do it for me.
Yeah.
And I have this thing when I still do it now when I'm coaching executives. But when I was doing a lot of presentations coaching, I had this phrase, and it's called "I deserve to be here." And I would get all my clients to write that down on a piece of paper, write on their hand. Got a couple got bracelets, and it was always a reminder that no matter how big the audience is out there, everybody's looking for your win. I mean, it's very different when you're doing stand-up comedy or something like that, right? And even then, the fact is that you're kind of like you're being trained, because if there's a heckler, we're going in, right? Don't heckle me. Do not heckle me. And I've been heckled, and I'm like, okay, how far can I go with this and worry about my safety on the way out of here, right?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the big thing about the big audiences is, and to be honest as well, when you're speaking to a 2,500 audience, you don't see them. You don't see them.
No.
Because you're usually speaking in an audience where the lights have gone down lower on the audience and the light is focusing on you.
Yeah.
So you'll see a couple of people in the front row. The only time you realize that it's 2,500 is if they turn the lights up, and that's when you're like, "Oh crikey, like this is a lot of people."
Yeah.
But to be fair, even when you're doing those big speeches, I'm always of the belief you always find one or two people in that audience who may be giving you body language and they're smiling and they're nodding and they're doing that stuff, and you lock onto those people, and you're literally talking to those 3 or 4 people, but you're talking to 2,500 people.
Yeah.
So for me, it's that point of focus. But yeah, when you know that you deserve to be there and you're part of somebody else's narrative, I think it takes a lot of the pressure off you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I take 3 really important points for that, like in no particular order, but I love the idea of picking somebody a friendly face. And I know it's something I've definitely done, where I will meet people if I can before I talk. So I get to know some people, and then most of the times I'll seed them with an easy question to ask for the Q&A if there is, and things like that. But I think, yeah, finding those people that are looking at you and engaging with you is super powerful.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy the comment about you're a character in somebody else's story. I think that, again, it harks to me of improv. And I think one of the things I took away from improv was not saying, oh, I'm now going to become Jack, a pirate on the, but like, so not that kind of character, but like you see yourself as you're playing a character in what's happening in that evening. And I think that's such a lovely way to describe it, because it does remove some of the kind of pressure from you in a way.
100%. 100%. And one other thing, actually, if I'll add to that, is whenever I've gone to speak on a big stage, I always go onto the stage before I speak. So
Yeah.
if I know that I've got to do a big presentation, whether it's, somebody may, usually if I'm going to a conference, I like to stay there for the whole day. That's just the way I am. But depending on my transport arrangements, wherever I am, if I'm speaking in the morning, I will be there way before the event starts, and way before I'm mic'd up. I will go and I will walk the whole stage, and I will look into the audience, and I'll look for those points that I'm I will be familiar with what corner would I look at. If I'm looking at a balcony, where will my eyes take me to? And so I go on that stage and I actually start to practice speaking some of the speech there on the stage, and some of the gestures and the points, or the, those throwaway lines that I'm going to use, or even some of the little bit of jokes. I do that in preparation before I actually go and do my
Yeah.
speech. So by the time I hit the stage, I've already warmed up because I've
Yeah.
already been there. So yeah, going out onto that stage and doing, even when it's a large audience, getting the opportunity to stand on that stage before you go, it really changes the whole tenor of the way that you present.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if it's just to know where the spotlights hit, so you can
100%.
so you can avoid them. Yeah, sometimes it's bright.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to close the loop, the third thing that I took away from that was that you deserve to be there. I think, imposter syndrome is real.
Yeah.
We all suffer from it to varying degrees at
Yeah.
different times in our lives, and I
Mhm.
think, like, I think if people can hear that, like, yeah, we're all the same. We all have those self-doubts. And yeah, you need to tell yourself you've done the work, you have the experience, you're here for a reason, and you deserve to be there. I love the writing it on your hand. I think that could be quite a
Very
powerful
proud.
advice.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, like, we met, I can't remember, you had a company called, I think in the beginning it was Magnificent Minds.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when you started various things, from TED stages to working with Virgin and Richard Branson.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit about that journey? I think it's interesting for
Yeah.
people.
So I was actually running two companies at the time. So one was called Magnificent Generation, and that was aimed at all the youth work that I did. And the other one, which is the corporate, was Magnificent Minds. And it was always of my opinion that how we present or how we carry ourselves is around the way that we think. And so Magnificent Minds was effectively just a play on that. It was just like, the people are like, oh, where you come from, Magnificent Minds? And they're like, ooh, what does that mean? And then it gave me a chance to talk about the narrative as to what I mean by people being magnificent. And so what that allowed me to do was go into organizations and talk about presentation skills, and effective communication, as well as leadership. And then, it got me on a bunch of stages. As I said, by accident, I ended up being on the Pitch to Rich event with Richard
Yeah.
Branson. I think it was in House of St Barnabas, and I got there by accident. I literally spoken to some of the team at Virgin, and they'd known I'd done some work, and I went on because I was actually the pitch coach,
Yeah.
and the person who was supposed to host, I don't think they could actually make it, so I ended up being the host there. And then they were like, "Okay, we need to come back. We need to come back and do this again." And I did it for another 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
And it was fun, and I got to meet Richard. We had some good banter. People thought like we were like lifelong mates, but I think all it was just in that moment there was a connection. We understood how we both communicated, and it was great for the time. So I went to South Africa with him, and his team did quite a bit of stuff around the UK. And in addition to that, it was a real jump off point. So I went to TED as well. I went to TED actually before that. It was in 2007. I went to the TED Global in Tanzania. And while I was there, I just met some amazing people. It was a really good event. And off the back of that, I got granted a TED fellowship. I was given a TED fellowship, and never really used it for anything, to be honest with you, other than to tell people I'm a TED fellow. Right? But it opened doors. Both of those things, both the TED fellowship and the work with Richard Branson, opened a hell of a lot of doors for me. And yeah, it just allowed me to go into these organizations. And the interesting thing is that I did a lot of stuff around the presentation skills, but a lot of leaders were like, "I think we need to go a bit deeper with this." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" They were like, "Well, you've got a commercial background. You come from finance. Or what do you know about leadership?" And I'm like, other than helping leaders to speak, I got no idea. And then I ended up doing a lot more work there. So I don't do as much presentation training, but when I am working with senior leaders, the one thing that I will always work on with them is around their business storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, and you've already started to hint at this with, opening doors,
Mhm.
with the things that you've done. But if we think about, why should people care about investing in the skill of public speaking,
Yes.
what would you say some of the, I call them superpowers or benefits of building that skill? What would you say?
So I think that there is let me not say I think, let me switch my language. I believe I believe that there is something about learning from other people what's being able um, to be able to speak and communicate with people effectively, what impact that has on the audience around you. So we'll see it in so many different forms of life, whether it's a politician trying to win over their kind of ideology or their way of seeing the world, whether it's uh, a person of in religious authority, an imam, a rabbi, a vicar, a priest, whatever the guru is, you'll always notice that there are people in positions of authority, extending wisdom. And then again, you think about on TV, people who are hosting events, whether it's newsreaders or sports events, or again, coming back to our point, you think of people who are hosting specific events. When you're speaking, you become that anchor person. You become that anchor person that allows people to see the world slightly differently, start to think about some stuff, which either confirms a belief that they already have, or challenges one that they've had and made them go, "Oh, crikey, I've never thought about that," or "I'm really kind of like pushing back against that because I believe in this idea." And so, whether you're thinking about interview skills for a job, whether you're thinking about doing presentations as part of your um, town hall in your organization. If you're running an organization, you've got to give investor meetings and investor calls. If you are in a team meeting and you've got to launch a new product or a service and you've got to present that, if you've got stakeholders that you're working with and you've got to communicate either good or bad news, nearly every single one of those involves some kind of speaking. And whether it's you're up on a stage or whether it's you sat across a screen or whatever the kind of spacing is, there's still something powerful about being able to have a central message to individuals about change, about empowerment, about a different way of thinking. And I believe that we are all capable of having our own stories and our own flavor that we bring to the table. And some people may be a bit more reserved than others. Some people don't necessarily like the spotlight. And that's why I say to people who are really like, "Oh my God, don't put me on a stage." That's not the end of your speaking, because doing something like, on Zoom or doing a podcast, for me, for a lot of introverts, that's ideal, because like it's you haven't got 1,000 eyes looking at you. You probably got one or two, and that makes it very, very different. But for me, it is about you recognizing that there's a message you want to tell to the world, and whether it's getting a job, getting investment, speaking to your stakeholders or customers or your staff, having that skill or having those skills that allow you to be able to tell the story in your own way not only brings you confidence, but also brings confidence to others around you who are either trusting you with the message that you are giving or just trusting you with your leadership and your vision as to where you're going to take them. So for me, I think it's a fundamental tool that should be taught. And one other thing I should say just before I finish is that one of the most powerful tools I learned as a speaker, and I think that nearly every student, or I think every adult should have done it, is learn how to debate,
Yeah.
learn how to give the argument from the other side without attaching too much emotion to it. And it doesn't, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of subjects that will have emotion. There's so many subjects that will have emotional overlay, but there is something about the way that you think about the world very differently when you learn to speak and articulate not only from your point of view, but from an opposing point of view as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I don't give it anymore, but I used to have a keynote about rhetoric.
Yeah,
And when I was researching what do I want to say, I kind of came across this fact that in the UK, we
yeah,
used to teach every child in every school
yes,
debate rhetoric because it was considered, how could you possibly go into society without that skill? And of course, now it's only really taught in places like Eton, where most of our politicians come from.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, so I think this idea that, and that's why I love your experience in the church at an early
yes,
age. I think if we give our kids that experience and that exposure at a young age, by the
yeah,
time they get to the workplace,
yes,
they've already moved some way down that path of building the skill. So I think, yeah,
100%, 100%. And even if it's not, to your point, even if it's not, some kids are absolutely terrified of standing on a stage age 5.
yeah,
I know when I was doing musicals and doing assemblies and stuff like that, other kids were like, "I would never do that." They were like, "I'll crap my pants." There was just absolutely no way I'm going to go and do that. And what I realized was that part of it is going, all right, how do I get a young kid to be confident to say that this is my understanding or this is my opinion when it's just one to one? but still get that confidence to be able to talk
Yeah.
and not to avoid conflict because you're afraid of what somebody may think about your point of view, just to be able to say it and have the support around you to go, okay, you know what, that's really good. May not agree with you, or I may agree with you. Absolutely brilliant. And, and create that space from quite young. Because I think once that habit gets into the system quite early, it's just one of those muscles that you obviously need to train, but it's just one of those muscles that you really benefit from if you start doing that quite young.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because if you think of improv, because when you were talking, I was thinking, actually, yeah, if I think back to my drama classes where, yeah, we were doing kind of plays and things like that, but actually, improv is kind of like a great way for people to start because
Yes.
making a mistake are the best bits. Like when it goes wrong, that's normally when people laugh and everybody claps.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's almost like improv should come first.
Yeah.
And then the okay, now we're going to do you stand up and give a presentation type thing.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
And there is something about one of the big things for me around improv is trust.
yeah,
That oh my god. The fact is that there are so many individuals who don't believe that their point of view or where they're coming from really matters. And the beautiful thing about improv for me is that there's the trust, there's that, and there's the widening of the thinking. The what we talk. Yes and right. That
yeah,
fundamental
exactly.
rule. That fundamental rule of improv.
Yeah,
Yes, whether I agree with you or not. Yeah, good point. And then
yeah,
you add new information, and it's fluid. It's fluid. And the beauty of improv for me, and this is one of the things that I believe so many people who are doing speaking are probably scared of most, is the uncertainty. It's uncertainty. There are rules to the game, right? We've got a sandpit and we know exactly how we can bounce in those rules, but we do that because we're supported by people. And in the same way, however you're going to go and give a presentation, it's like, what is that sandpit you're playing with? Yes, and what's the new information that you're going to bring? Anybody, you and I can sit here all day long, but there are probably a couple other billion people around the world who has their own take on storytelling and their own way that they'll present it, and it's just as valid. So yeah, that bit around the yes and bit, when I got permission for that, woo, I was gone. And unfortunately, there are some ways that people don't like that. Like yes and in school can be a real problem for some education people because there's one rule, right? There's one answer.
yeah,
And even in some organizations, you go to do something, there's one rule, there's one answer. And for me, yes and opens up that space to go, right, let me look at it from a different angle, and let me see this as a collaboration rather than you competing with me or telling me that I'm wrong.
yeah, yeah. I think yeah, more people should try improv
Oh, yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
So, what do you think gets in people's way when they want to be a speaker? What are the blocks that you've seen? Like what's stopping them meeting their potential in a way?
The first thing is that people think they need to be perfect. People so think that they need to be perfect. And I get it all the time. I can't speak like you. I'm not perfect. I'm like, have you heard how fast I speak on stage? Have you heard my grammar? And I've been doing this for the best part of 30 years. Like, are you serious? But then people look and they project an idea that they see of perfection, and they think that they need to be perfect. And I'm sure you've seen this, but I've had people in tears and really disappointed because they felt that they haven't met a certain mark. And I'm like, it's a continuous journey.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't have to be perfect. I can't remember all my lines. Bring a bloody set of cards with you then. Oh, I can't stand out in the middle of stage. Stand behind a rostrum. Oh, I can't do PowerPoint like that. Well, don't use any PowerPoint. Think about another visual prop. And there are all these kinds of scenarios that people bring up around how they're going to present that they forget, as I say, like individuals like yourself and myself. It's a craft that we've been developing and continue to develop over years.
yeah,
I remember one of the conversations I had with Richard Branson was around his dyslexia, and I know it was something that kind of like hampered his public speaking for a while, because he would do some stuff, but it was a lot of showmanship, right? It was that, yeah, I'm going to lift this person up, I'm going to do the balloon, all the rest. He didn't have to speak; he could do the creative side of it. but having to sit down and get on to questions. And I remember when we had our first interview, actually, we went to his house. This is just before we did Pitch to Rich. Went to his house and I was interviewing him for this channel. And there was somebody who was waiting for him, a journalist who waited for him. And he made that journalist wait 20 minutes longer than he should have because we were having a conversation. And it was just, we were just having really good back and forth. And I know what it was. There was no deliberation. We just had this great conversation, both on and off camera. And I think he just was just like, oh, thank God for that. I don't have to, to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I believe whether you have dyslexia, dyspraxia, whether you have stage fright, glossophobia is obviously a bit more of a more serious issue, which obviously people can work through. But to get out of your head and to recognize again, this is not about you; it's about your audience and what they want to hear from you. There's no such thing as perfection. Everybody has a challenge, and it's a continuous learning process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
And I think like it's important for people to know as well that even after you've been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years, you can still have days where you suddenly get super nervous before a talk,
Oh my.
or
Yeah.
it goes wrong, or like, so it's, we're all the same. It's biology. We all have the same fears that we have to deal with and manage. It never goes away 100%, and you don't want it to go away 100%.
Yes.
But it's, yeah, I think it's people need to let themselves off the hook more. That
Yes.
it's you're
Oh my
doing
God.
good. Just keep
Yeah.
going forward.
Be okay. Be okay. Yeah. Just be okay. Be gentle. Be gentle to yourself. That's
Yeah,
what it is. If that's the word I can use, be gentle to yourself.
yeah, definitely. So, what would you advise to somebody listening who is maybe at the beginning of their journey? Maybe
Mm.
that they're junior, or maybe they just decided now's the time in my life I want to tackle this. What would you suggest?
I'd suggest again, like you said quite eloquently just now, that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And just soak in as much as you can. There are lots of people who start on this journey and they want to be a TED or TEDx speaker. Like, just slow down a bit. Like, just just be a normal speaker first before you want to get onto those stages. And even when you get onto that stage, even if you do a TEDx talk, that doesn't make you a complete speaker. There are individuals who will go on and do a TEDx talk who would never make it to a TED stage. And I say that respectfully. You just the caliber of how you present it's just not like not everybody plays football can play for the Premier League.
Yep.
Not everybody who sings can have a top 100 hit. Everybody can have a go. Don't get me wrong, but just about managing those expectations. I'd say go to spaces where you see other people, when they present. I don't really like shows like Question Time or whatever because they jar me somewhat with the way that they deal with it. But it's great ways to see those individuals who can eloquently present. And they can, and one of the things I will say about things like political shows like Question Time and others is that you'll see how people operate under pressure. And that's a great way of learning how to do that. Go to storytelling nights, go to stand-up comedy evenings. Try not to sit at the front if you don't want to get lambasted. Try and make yourself in the middle or the back, right? Go stand-up comedy, go and do improv. Go to the theater and watch how people go and speak when they're on theater. Go and see people in your religious or community groups and see how they do that. And then gradually start learning yourself. If you want to learn the kind of like craft of it, things like Toastmasters are great ways of being able to go in there and learn the actual craft of being able to put together the speeches and presentations. But don't limit it to that. There are so many other places you can actually go and always be learning. Take notes. So much video. Gosh, the amount of video content
Yeah.
now you can Google Talks, TED Talks. God, everybody's got some kind of talk on there. Just go and learn from that stuff.
Yeah.
And and just pace yourself. And then every milestone you get, you just make a record of that and then just keep it moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the comment about lots of video. It's something I did for such a long time where I would just every lunch break or when I had 5 minutes, I would just hunt around on YouTube and find a talk.
Yes.
And I would watch, see what they're up to, and then every, I don't know, 10 or 20 talks, there'll be one that like suddenly I'm glued to the screen, like I can't stop listening, and they're the ones that I would be like, okay, what just happened? I
Yes.
need to like reverse engineer this a bit. Like, how did she structure it? What
Yes.
language did she use? What was it about pauses? What, like, and just like really try and break down like, okay, what made me be glued to the screen? And I think there's tons to be learned
Yeah.
from stuff like that.
100%. 100%. Always be making notes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so I want to give you time in a minute just to talk about where people can connect with you and find out more about your stuff. But is there anything else that we haven't covered that you feel is important you want to mention, or any last pieces of advice for people?
So firstly, make sure that they read your book and buy your book and go and get your services. Let's get that out there. Let's push that out there. 100% right. You know me, I'm going to be an ambassador for you. 100%. But always be learning. As I said, always be learning. And even when you're learning, make sure it's a wide breadth. I'll give you one example. Like when I see lots of people talk about storytelling, they always use the hero's journey. And I'm like, that's one of probably about 15 or 16 variations of storytelling. There are so many, like I really love like Korean TV. Like Korean TV and film, like they do not end like Hollywood. Like Hollywood always want that happy ending, but he rides off to you're the hero. Some Korean films I've watched, I'm walking away from it going, listen, I need to go back to therapy. I need to go and have a conversation because this is deep. This has left me in my feelings. But that's beautiful, isn't it? Because life is never linear. It's never going to be that perfect. Hero goes there, finds something, da da da, gets it on the journey. He turns out to be the hero. Sometimes stuff are going to end up crap. Sometimes there's going to be an anti-hero story. So when you are looking at those models, look as wide as you can. Look into varying cultures and spaces to see how people communicate. And as I said, just keep learning. And even you and I, we both come from a space where we've dabbled with using visual props. And I'll say to people, whether it's digitally, whether it's PowerPoint, Keynote, Prezi, Canva, all the different variations, just see how you can utilize those things to complement you, but not to take over. Because a lot of people, when they are doing that stuff, oh, I need to go. Like somebody asked me the other day, I'm doing a speech next week it's called A Well-Told Story. It's about business storytelling. And they were like, oh, can you send us your presentation deck? I was like, there isn't one. And they're like, what? I said, I'll give you a holding slide, but this is the presentation deck.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you a holding slide and I'll give you some handouts afterward, but there's not. And in their mind, they can't believe that. And I love doing that because so many people expect me to rock up with an actual deck.
Yeah.
So just mix it up, play around with it. Think about all those tools that will help you. Remember, it's you're the messenger, but more importantly than the messenger is the message. And then just think about. So there's three things. Think about think about first the message that you want to get out to people. Think about the medium, how you want to connect that message. What's that platform or what have you? And then work on yourself as a messenger to think about how best you can actually put that message out there.
Yeah, it's great advice. I think it also ties into this. Everybody needs to find their own voice or their own character, if you like, when you're doing this stuff. So I think, yeah, you need that breadth of exposure to different things to figure out,
Yes.
who am I when I step onto that stage or I stand up in front of my team at work? Where do I feel the most comfortable? I think
Yes.
it's also a journey that will help with.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
amazing. So, where can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you, see your stuff? I'll obviously anything you mention, I'll put links to
Yes.
things below.
Yeah. The two spaces people mostly find me are at davidmcqueen.co.uk or on LinkedIn, and my kind of like sub after the .com thing is Mr. David McQueen. So those are the two spaces. I'm always running my mouth on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. But otherwise than that, a lot of the stuff that I do, you'll find on my website, davidmcqueen.co.uk.
Yeah. Yeah, because they should check out your book, The Brave Leader.
Indeed.
And you also have your own podcast. I think two
I do.
podcasts now. Two. Yeah.
I have David the imaginatively titled the David McQueen podcast. You can't lose it that way, right? Yeah, so I've obviously got when you go to the site, you'll see the links there for the podcast and obviously the
The
book.
book.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I have done for many years since I first wandered into Richard Branson's event and saw you up on the stage.
Likewise, sir.
So yeah,
Likewise. Thank you.
it's been a pleasure, and see you again soon.
Thank you.